I wasn't sleeping. I was working. My apartment was dark except for the glow of my drafting table lamp and the blue light of my phone on the desk. At 11:52 p.m., the screen lit up. It was a text from my mother, Susan. There was no greeting, not even a casual hello. Just a demand, blunt as a sledgehammer against a retaining wall. Kaylee is facing eviction. We need $5,000 immediately. Family helps family. I stared at the timestamp. 11:52. The audacity was staggering. They hadn't spoken to me in 6 weeks, not since the day the truth came out, not since I discovered exactly what their version of family cost. I didn't feel the familiar panic or the old urge to fix the cracks in their foundation. I felt nothing but cold, sharp clarity. Before I show you exactly how I responded to that text, and trust me, I didn't send a dime, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Structural failure usually starts with a loud crack. This was silent. I didn't throw the phone across the room. Panic is a design flaw I had engineered out of my system years ago. That is the thing about realizing you have been used as a financial resource for your entire life. Eventually, the grief burns out, and all that remains is efficiency. I sat down at my desk. My movements were precise, practiced. I woke up my laptop and navigated to my firm's internal career page. I knew exactly what I was looking for. We had an opening for an administrative assistant. It was entry-level work filing, scheduling, answering phones. It paid $42,000 a year with full benefits. It was a decent job. It was honest work. It was exactly the kind of labor Kaylee had never deigned to do because she was too busy being the visionary of a company that didn't actually exist. Retrieving the document took 3 seconds. I downloaded the application PDF. I opened the text thread with my mother. I didn't type a paragraph about how much they had hurt me. I didn't ask why they thought I had $5,000 lying around after they had already stolen $56,000 from my future. Arguments require emotional investment, and I was done investing in a condemned property. I attached the file. Then I typed 3 short sentences. I cannot send cash. However, my firm is hiring. She can interview on Tuesday at 9 a.m. I hit send. I set the phone face down on the drafting table next to my blueprints. I didn't block them. Blocking them would have been an act of self-preservation, a sign that I was afraid of their response. I wasn't afraid. I wanted to see it. I wanted to witness the moment they realized the dynamic had shifted. I wanted to watch them process the fact that the Bank of Megan was not just closed for the night, but permanently condemned. My apartment was perfectly silent. It was a small space. Nothing like the sprawling suburban fortress my parents owned in Aurora, with its vaulted ceilings and grand foyer, but I paid for every square inch of this silence. I listened to the hum of my refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene at their house right now. The panic, the screaming, the frantic pacing as they realized they couldn't manipulate the one asset they had always relied on. For 28 years, I had been their utility player, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, the one who proofread the emails, the one who stayed quiet so Kaylee could shine. They thought this text was just another repair request. They thought they could just flip the switch and I would turn on. But they forgot one crucial thing about utilities. If you don't pay the bill, eventually, the service gets cut off. And tonight, I was cutting the line. To understand why I sent that PDF instead of a check, you have to understand the house I grew up in. It was in a subdivision called The Estates at Cherry Creek. From the street, it was impressive. 3,000 square feet, brick facade, manicured lawn that my father, Brian, obsessed over every Saturday morning. It had what realtors call curb appeal. It projected success. It projected stability. It projected the perfect American family. But inside, the house was drowning. We had vaulted ceilings, but the furnace made a rattling sound that we were told to ignore because fixing it was too expensive. We had granite countertops, but the refrigerator was often empty, except for condiments and expired milk. My parents, Brian and Susan, lived their lives for the audience on the other side of the windows. They bought new cars on leases they couldn't afford because image is equity. They threw lavish parties with catered food while dodging calls from creditors. They taught us that appearance was the only currency that mattered. And in that economy, my sister Kaylee was the gold standard. Kaylee was beautiful, charismatic, and completely allergic to effort. She was the dream. She was the one they showed off at dinner parties. Kaylee is going to be a model, they'd say. Or Kaylee is launching a lifestyle brand. They poured money into her like she was a venture capital investment. Modeling classes, acting workshops, a personal branding consultant when she was 19. I was the utility. I was the boring one. I liked math. I liked dirt. I liked building things that didn't fall down. For birthdays, Kaylee got designer handbags and trips to Cabo. I got drafting pencils and practical winter coats. I didn't mind. Not really. I told myself it was because they trusted me. They knew I was low maintenance. They knew I was going to be okay. I started working when I was 14, mowing lawns in the neighborhood. I saved every dollar. When I was 12, my father sat me down and told me about the college fund. "We're putting money aside for you, Megan," he said, looking serious and responsible. I clung to that promise. I treated it like a sacred pact. Every time I didn't ask for a new dress, every time I stayed home to study while they took Kaylee out to dinner, I told myself I was making a deposit. I was investing in my own stability. I thought we were partners. But looking back now, I realized the truth. I wasn't their partner. I wasn't even really their child. I was their insurance policy. They knew Kaylee was a gamble. They knew her businesses were fantasies, but they funded them anyway because her success would validate their vanity. Her fame would be their fame. I was just the backup plan. I was the safety net they kept in the trunk just in case the Highwire Act failed. Dreams get funded, no matter the cost. Insurance? You just pay the premiums and hope you never have to use it. I spent 18 years paying my premiums. I kept my head down. I got the grades. I got the scholarships. I worked 3 jobs in college so I wouldn't have to touch the fund, thinking I could use it for a down payment on a house someday. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, and useful enough, I would eventually earn my turn. I didn't know that insurance policies don't get turns. They just get cashed out. The moment everything shattered wasn't when I got the text. It was 6 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in a cubicle at First National Bank. Across from me sat a loan officer named David, a guy about my age who looked increasingly uncomfortable. I was there to do something I had dreamed about since I was 16, buy a home. Not a mansion, just a 2-bedroom condo near the park. It had good bones, south-facing windows, and it was mine. I had the pre-approval letter in my bag, I had my savings, and I had the college fund, $56,400. That was the number. I had checked the balance online 2 years ago, right after graduation, just to see it. Since then, I hadn't touched it. I hadn't needed to. I told myself it was for this moment. For the down payment. For the foundation. "Okay, Megan," David said, typing on his keyboard. "We just need to transfer the funds for the earnest money deposit. I see you have the joint savings account linked here." "Yes," I said, smiling. My hands were shaking a little, but it was a good shake. "Go ahead and pull it from there." David hit enter. He frowned. He hit enter again. "That's odd," he muttered. "What is it?" He turned the screen toward me. "It's showing insufficient funds." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. There's over $50,000 in there." "Megan," he said gently. "The balance is 0. Actually, it's negative $35 for an overdraft fee from last month." The air conditioner in the bank suddenly sounded like a jet engine roaring in my ears. My vision tunneled. I stared at the screen. Transaction after transaction. Withdrawal. Withdrawal. Wire transfer. All of them dated over the last 2 years. "Can you—" I had to clear my throat because my voice was gone. "Can you see where the money went?" David clicked a few times. It looks like a series of transfers to an external business account. Kaylee Co. Luxury Organics. Kaylee. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a bank error. My parents, who were joint owners on the account since I was a minor, had drained it. They hadn't taken it all at once. They had siphoned it. Every time Kaylee needed startup capital, every time she needed inventory for her skincare line that nobody bought, every time she needed to throw a launch party to look successful on Instagram, they had taken my 18 years of discipline, my nights working at the library, my skipped spring breaks, and they had poured it into Kaylee's vanity project. They had literally liquidated my future to buy her curb appeal. I walked out of the bank. I sat in my 10-year-old sedan in the parking lot. My hands were numb. I tried to put the key in the ignition, but I couldn't make my fingers work. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, while the realization washed over me, cold and heavy. They didn't just steal my money. They stole the only thing I thought I had earned. Their respect. They looked at my stability and saw a resource to be harvested. They looked at Kaylee's delusion and saw a dream worth protecting at any cost. I didn't drive home for an hour. I just sat there, shivering in the heat, while the foundation of my entire life crumbled into dust. I drove straight from the bank to their house. I didn't call first. I walked through the front door, the one with the custom wreath Susan changed seasonally to impress the neighbors, and I found them in the kitchen. They were drinking wine. Kaylee was there, scrolling on her phone, complaining about the lighting for her next unboxing video. I didn't say a word. I slammed the bank printout onto the quartz island. "Where is it?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it vibrated in the air. Brian picked up the paper. He didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed, like I was a client questioning a billable hour. "Megan," he said, putting his glasses on, "we were going to tell you." "Tell me what?" "That you stole $56,000? "It wasn't stealing," Susan interjected, her voice sharp. "It was a reallocation of family assets." "Reallocation. That was my money," I said. "I worked for it. You promised it. And we used it for the family member with the highest potential upside," Brian said. He actually said that. He looked me in the eye and used corporate speak to justify robbing his own daughter. "You have a degree, Megan. You can get a loan. Kaylee is trying to build an empire. She needs liquid capital." We made an executive decision. Kaylee didn't even look up from her phone. She just sipped her wine. "God, Megan, don't be so dramatic. I'll pay you back when the brand takes off. You're punishing me for having ambition just because you're happy being a worker bee." They looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. In their eyes, my stability wasn't an achievement. It was a justification for my exploitation. Because I was strong, I deserved to carry the load. Because Kaylee was weak, she deserved the cargo. I stood there, and for a terrifying moment, I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I felt a familiar urge to apologize, to say, "Okay, I understand. I'll figure it out." For years, I thought that reaction was weakness. I thought I was a coward. But standing in that kitchen, looking at the people who were supposed to protect me, I finally understood the mechanism of my own silence. It wasn't weakness. It was survival. Psychologists call it the fawn response. When you can't fight the predator and you can't flee, you try to please them to avoid being hurt. I had spent my entire life fawning. I had trained myself to be the low-maintenance child, the one who didn't have needs, because I learned early on that having needs made me a burden, while having dreams made Kaylee a star. I didn't check the bank account for 2 years, not because I was stupid, but because deep down, I knew what I would find. And I knew that finding it would mean the end of the only version of love they were capable of giving me. I had complied to feel safe. I had let them rob me to feel included. But as I looked at Brian swirling his wine, calculating the ROI on his favorite daughter, something snapped. The fawn died right there on the kitchen floor. "It wasn't an investment," I said. "It was a theft, and I am done paying for your delusions." I walked out. I didn't go back for 6 weeks. Not until the text came at 11:52 p.m. asking for rent. I didn't spend those 6 weeks crying. I spent them auditing. I am a landscape architect. My job is to look at a piece of land and see exactly what is underneath the surface. I apply that same scrutiny to Kaylee Luxury Organics. I started with the public business filings. Kaylee had registered the LLC 2 years ago, right around the time the first withdrawal hit the account. But when I looked for permits, manufacturing permits, warehouse leases, FDA compliance for cosmetics, there was nothing. Then I went to her social media. It was a masterclass in smoke and mirrors. Photos of lab samples that were clearly just generic bottles with printed labels. Videos of her meeting with suppliers that were geotagged at a resort in Tulum. But the real smoking gun was on an old iPad my parents had given me years ago to use for digital sketching. It was still logged into the family iCloud. I opened the email app. I searched Kaylee. And there it was. Not invoices from chemical suppliers. Not contracts with retailers. It was a welcome email from the Boss Babe Academy. Congratulations, Kaylee. You are now a diamond-level distributor for New Skin Glow. It wasn't a business. It was a multi-level marketing scheme. A pyramid scam wrapped in empowerment language and pastel aesthetics. Kaylee wasn't a CEO. She was a customer. She had spent $56,000 buying inventory she couldn't sell to qualify for status levels that meant nothing. The business trips were just conventions where she paid thousands to listen to gurus tell her to manifest wealth. But the email that broke me wasn't from the MLM. It was from Brian to Susan, dated 18 months ago. Subject: Kaylee's inventory costs. I know it's a lot, Sue. But look at the photos from the launch party. She looks like a star. Everyone is talking about her. If we pull the plug now, she'll be humiliated. Let's just transfer another $5,000 from the joint account. Megan won't notice. She's too busy working. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. They knew. They knew it was a scam. They knew she wasn't selling anything. They knew she was hemorrhaging money. But they kept feeding the beast because the image of Kaylee being a successful entrepreneur was more important to them than the reality of my financial survival. They bought her a costume of success with the money I had saved for a home. They chose her vanity over my shelter. They didn't just bet on the wrong horse. They knew the horse was dead, and they kept buying it golden saddles because they liked how it looked in the parade. I printed everything. The MLM welcome packet, the diamond distributor invoices, the email chain between my parents admitting they were robbing me to save face. I put it all in a thick manila folder. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was armed. It was a Tuesday evening, 2 days after I sent the job application link. I was eating takeout on my balcony when I saw the headlights. Not one car, but two. My parents' SUV and Kaylee's leased convertible pulled into the guest parking lot of my complex. I watched them get out. Brian looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched. Susan was wearing sunglasses even though it was dusk. Kaylee looked terrified. They walked toward my building, not with the swagger of homeowners, but with the shuffle of people who had just realized the roof was caving in. I met them at my apartment door. I didn't let them knock. I opened it and stood in the threshold, blocking the way. Megan. Susan started, her voice cracking. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. Please, we need to talk. I think you said everything you needed to say in the email, I replied. My voice was steady. The one where you decided my future was worth less than Kaylee's launch party. We were desperate, Brian said. He looked exhausted. We took out a second mortgage to cover the inventory costs last year. We're tapped out. Megan, if Kaylee gets evicted, she has to move back in with us, and we might be losing the house too. The curb appeal was gone. The structural rot had finally eaten through the foundation. They were broke. They had leveraged everything, their home, my future, their retirement on a pyramid scheme because they couldn't bear to admit their golden child was a failure. Just 5,000, Kaylee whispered. She wasn't arrogant anymore. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and expected someone else to sweep it up. I promise I'll pay you back. With what? I asked. New Skin credits? I reached behind me and picked up the manila folder. I held it out to Brian. "What is this?" he asked. "It's an audit," I said. "It's everything. The MLM registration, the fake invoices, and the emails between you and Mom admitting you knew it was a scam but funded it anyway because you didn't want her to be humiliated." Susan gasped. Brian went pale. "I'm not your insurance policy anymore," I said, looking at each of them. "I'm not the utility you turn on when it gets dark. I am the person you robbed. And I am done paying for your delusions." "Megan, please," Susan sobbed. "We're family." "No," I said. "We're a business transaction. And you're bankrupt." I stepped back and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I listened to them knock for 10 minutes. I didn't answer. I didn't call the police. I just stood there, in the silence of the home I had bought with my own money, and let the severance be final. The for sale sign went up in front of the house in Aurora 3 months later. The curb appeal finally failed. The second mortgage, combined with the credit card debt from funding the influencer lifestyle, was too much weight for the structure to bear. They sold it at a loss to avoid foreclosure. Brian and Susan moved into a 2-bedroom apartment complex near the highway. There is no grand foyer. There are no dinner parties to impress the neighbors because they don't know the neighbors. Kaylee didn't take the administrative job I offered. She ended up working retail at the mall, selling someone else's cosmetics for minimum wage. The empire she tried to build on my back has been dissolved. I didn't get my college fund back. $56,000 is gone, vaporized into the ether of their delusion. But I kept the $5,000 they asked for rent, and I kept every paycheck I have earned since. Last week, I closed on a piece of land. It is small, just an acre west of the city, but the soil is good. I stood there yesterday, looking at the mountains, feeling the solid ground beneath my boots. I thought about my parents. I thought about how they lived their lives chasing the appearance of wealth while rotting from the inside out. For a long time, I thought revenge meant destruction. I thought I wanted to see them suffer the way I suffered when I sat in that bank parking lot. But standing on my own dirt, I realized the truth. True justice isn't burning their house down. They did a fine job of that themselves. True justice is building a foundation that will last a lifetime. They burned their future to keep warm for a night. They sacrificed their relationship with their only competent child for a fantasy that didn't exist. They are currently harvesting the bitter crop of their own neglect. Me? I am planting seeds. I am digging footings. I am pouring concrete. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who will taste the harvest. It won't be them. It will be me. I built my foundation on truth, even if I had to pour the concrete alone. If you've ever had to build your life from scratch because the people who were supposed to help you actually held you back, hit that like button and share your story below. I read every single one.